guys for joining us, and welcome to another Warren and Will's Wild Wine Reviews, or Will and Warren's Wild Wine Reviews. As I said in our last review, it doesn't really matter which way you do it.
We can put the W's in any order we want.
WWWW.
Yep.
You figure it out.
Yep.
So tonight we're doing a Rioja from Spain. So,
special Rioja.
Yeah, and it's quite something. This is a Monte Real Grand Reserva Rioja 1998 library release. It was re-released in 2021. You can buy this almost anywhere right now, despite it being 24 years old.
They did a across the board large scale library release. They even got a little sticker on the back telling you when they released it.
2021, and I did a search. There are dozens of different places you can buy it. You can buy it right now at Vivino. Speaking of which, we'll give you the Vivino stats, which is the thing I like to do because Vivino is awesome. If you don't have it, download the app, follow me and Will. You will not regret it. So the Vivino stats is 4.3 stars for this year.
Sweet.
They had 473 reviews. Now the average price is $68.99. I've seen it going for as much as 120 and as little as 40.
Oh,
so,
interesting.
Look around a little. Wine Enthusiast gave it 94 points. This puppy spent 5 years in oak, 3 of which, and then 3 years aging in the bottle. Now the oak was 90% American oak and 10% French oak. The winery is part of the Bodegas Riojanas, which was founded in 1890 by the Artaco family. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Artaco, yeah.
And they're currently run by the 5th generation winemakers. I couldn't get to their website because it wasn't secure, and none of my browsers would let me on it. I'm like, it's a goddamn website browser. I don't care if it's secure. I'm not exchanging any info with them. All I'm doing is reading what they've got to say. But none of them, I don't have a browser that would let me near it. I tried incognito, doesn't matter, I couldn't get on. So the information that I have here, I gleaned from other places. So they're based in the center of the Rioja Alta region in the village of Cenacero?
Cenacero.
One of 13 wineries that are over 100 years old in Rioja. They have over 247 acres of vineyards. That's
impressive.
Which makes me think they're not all in one place.
Yeah, they're probably a collective.
They grow Tempranillo,
Mazuelo,
and Graciano. Handpicked by their people who then bring it down. And so they have 3 designations. Crianza, Reserva, and Grand Reserva. This is a Grand Reserva. Now, this was the 1998 has a couple of interesting things going. It was the first year the wine was composed. Their Grand Rioja was composed of 100% Tempranillo. This is 100% Tempranillo, and it's the first time.
Which is not normally your favorite.
No, but I like older wines, so I got it because of the age. And the fact that it wasn't all that expensive. I paid less than the 68. I think I paid 40 for it.
They were also made in a different style back in the 90s, as we'll see.
Yeah, and this was the first one that they used 10% French oak, and the rest was American oak.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I don't really know why you
5 years of American oak.
So we're going to open this. Now, I brought down 2 wine openers. I don't know if any of you have seen this. This is what you use if you break the cork, because you can get in, and you twist it, and you get some pressure, and you can pull it up. I'm hoping to not have to use this puppy.
They're a little difficult.
Especially since I'm not very good with them.
Yeah, me either, unfortunately. I used to practice it with synthetic cork so I wouldn't break them, and it's still difficult.
Well, I only ever use it when I break a cork.
It's one of those things
why
where
would you want to use it otherwise?
Well, if you practice at it, you get good at it, how often do you really use one?
So the thing about this one is that even though they just released it, they didn't just bottle it. This was certainly... and there we are with the cracked... now, that's enough that I may not need to use that.
Yeah, I think you should be fine.
So broke the cork in half just before getting it out, because it's old.
Yeah.
And I would say, because from everything I was reading about it, there wasn't anything that made me believe. Since they did 5 years of in oak and then 3, they would have had to rebottle it some time ago.
Now, it's worth noting that 3 years in the bottle was before releasing it in 2006.
Right.
So it has spent an additional... nice, well done.
Look, you can tell that's been in there a long time.
Let's show the camera.
Yeah, that is a lot of aging on that cork.
Yeah, quite dark, as you can see. But not, as you'll notice, not purple or red the way some of the other ones we've tasted have been.
Look at the color.
It's basically, it's
an interesting purple.
Brick red, black, or almost indeterminate.
Really, I mean, I can smell it from here.
It's
I mean, and this is a screened room with a bit of a breeze coming through tonight.
Definitely quite dark.
Let's see what we got.
A lot of red fruit.
Yeah.
I would say predominantly, maybe all red fruit.
Quite a bit of oak, as you would expect, with something that's been in 5 years. It's
Though, not, honestly, I mean, yes, it's there, but maybe, I don't know, after 5 years, I imagine after a certain point.
It's front and center for me. It's front and center for me. But, you know, Will and I have a different tolerance for oak. I know.
No, Warren is good at spotting it, and I suck at spotting it. That's the difference between us. Warren has the ability that most, maybe not most, but a lot of wine people do.
That's really interesting.
I'm picking up. Are you picking up any like tobacco, like pipe tobacco?
Oh hell yeah! There's vanilla pipe tobacco. There's a little bit.
Oh, I love that palette. Okay.
Yeah, that's really something.
So the nose was giving me a lot of red fruit. I've learned to pick up oak descriptors mainly by osmosis, and I was picking up some of that sort of pipe tobacco thing.
This is a really good wine, folks.
Yeah, the acidity is really nice.
Definitely a Grand Reserva.
You know what's interesting is you mentioned this being 100% Tempranillo. I'm not sure that I would have guessed it was 100%, but I would have guessed that there was less Garnacha because it's not as soft. It's got a much more acidic.
It doesn't give you as much of a full mouthfeel either.
No, it's a lot more tight and driven. A lot more focused up front. It's kind of like a
I don't want to call it light because it's not.
No, not at all.
But it's not.
After
heavy.
5 years in oak, I don't think anything will be light.
Right. And there's there's a lot of tannin structure on the back end, but it's not like really intrusive tannins. Interestingly enough, because I've had some Chateau de Pape. We need to review a Chateau de Pape.
Absolutely.
There was nothing but tannins, because I had it when it was only 5 years old, and you really don't want to do that.
Well, and also depending on the blend, I mean, the thing about the Rhone, especially the Southern Rhone, is that you could do one that's 100% Syrah.
I forgot to turn the.
Well, as long as we're
you got a couple of free minutes, folks.
As long as we're within 5 minutes, the whole thing is keeping us honest.
Yeah, and definitely go to our link. There's a link on this. It'll bring you back to our website, and you can order this from Vivino, and we'll get a little cut of that.
If you are a fan of old school Riojas,
especially with some age.
The fact is that every so often you wander across one of these in the wild where a distributor happened across one. They are doing this deliberately. This was a plan. Well, I don't know if it was planned. Who knows what the winery turned up?
That's really interesting.
But they could have set it aside on purpose.
A lot of vanilla on that sip. A little bit of funk on the nose just now that I hadn't noticed.
There is a definite funkiness on this wine, but this is a funkiness born of age. It's not a funkiness born of...
Just swirl the glass. You'll be fine. It'll go away. It doesn't enter into the palate at all.
It's also worth noting, and we've talked about this when we've decanted some wines. Warren and I just opened this wine, so essentially you're going to witness the evolution. I
should have decanted it, but it's a 1990.
Well, and also they got to watch you see you doing the cork.
That was what I wanted, because it's an old cork that I thought might split, and if it had split in a different way, I would have had to use this.
The wine peak.
Because you don't want to pop it in, but I should have brought down like the stuff that I have to filter wines if that happens, but I didn't, because I was pretty sure I wouldn't fail. Right. And didn't.
Nope, you didn't. So here's the thing. We have talked in other reviews where we decanted a wine, and we have said, we're an hour and a half in or whatever, and so essentially
this one's fine out of the bottle.
No, it is, but the thing is that as we do this video, our last glass is not going to be the same as this glass.
I'm not sure why I had a lot going on today. I'm not sure why I didn't decant.
I am completely 100% okay with it because I think it's cool every so often to have a bottle this old.
I mean, 5 years and
just pop
probably is begging to decant.
Yeah.
Now, all the reviews I said that when people were drinking this in 2015, which is where most of the reviews are from, they're like, perfect right now, might be good in 10 years. It's good.
No, I don't think you need to keep this. I mean, how long has it been in the bottle? It's been in the bottle since 2003. Yeah. This is 19 years in the bottle.
It's fine.
I'd say it's fine now.
It's probably got at least. It's beautiful now. I'm sure it's got at least another decade myself from having drank a lot of old wines.
I mean, the thing is with wines like this, and it's difficult to recommend this at what was it, $68 a bottle? At that price level, you don't have the same flexibility. But my rule of thumb is, if you're buying a wine and you want to know if it's going to age well, and this is usually more of a rule of thumb with the younger wines, is buy a couple. And taste them every
couple of years.
Yeah, exactly, and get a sense for where they're going.
Well, I've talked about how I don't think these guys make one where I like to buy, if I get a case of wine, I like to get some half bottles to go with it, and then I can have one of those every year because they're aging twice as fast.
I wish there were more half bottles.
I know when to drink the case.
Yeah.
So if I'm drinking it and it's like perfect, I'm like, I'll have a bottle now. But I'll see how it tastes next year, and then if it's not perfect, or in this case, ooh, the last one wasn't perfect, this one isn't. I'll have a bottle in a year and a half.
Yep.
And then you're over the hill and like, okay, I need to drink them all in the next year so they don't reach that point, or next year so they don't reach that point. I think it's a marvelous thing that we just don't get to do much of, and most people don't even realize it's a thing. So I keep trumpeting it, you know. But the problem, of course, is it's hard to get your hands on. You either get really bad wines, or they only come. You know, I was looking at one from I think it was La Quintessa on Saturday, and it was a half bottle. I'm not drinking it because I don't like their wine much. I have all kinds of issues with it. It's just so generic, and it's $270 for a bottle. And so this was like $140 for the half bottle. And I'm like, yeah, I don't like your wine anyway.
Well, just think of what you could get for $140 for a full bottle.
Oh, no kidding! I was in the wine lab. I could have gotten almost. You know, there were tons of good wines. What I did get was, you know, a sampler of oysters.
Oh, nice.
There was like, I don't know, 16 oysters and 6 shrimp.
Yeah.
And I drank shatter, and then I drank the cab from The Prisoner, because you know that's what they had in the bottle, and I didn't. Really
Warren is lucky he can drink red wine with shellfish.
I can.
Now
can.
The thing is, I actually haven't tried, so I don't know if I have that gene or don't.
I do not.
And I don't know how common or prevalent it is.
I don't either.
But the thing about it, you can compensate for it in some cases. If you're having shellfish that are served in a tomato sauce, sometimes the
tomato
can
and acidity from it
can overcome whatever the chemical combination that you get between tannins and shellfish.
And that's a genetic thing.
I
know that I don't have that genetics.
Yep.
Now, if I have people over and I were to be cooking shellfish and I didn't know if they did, I'd serve away.
One of the things I love,
and
people are like, but you can't serve red wine with fish, right? And I'm like, dude, if you have an oak aged cab with a cedar plank salmon,
it's gonna be beautiful.
Oh, I mean, and even Warren doesn't like Pinot Noirs, but Pinot Noir and salmon is a wonderful combination. But even with
food, I can drink all kinds of wines
that
I wouldn't drink out of the bottle.
Especially if you only have to have like 4 ounces
glass,
of it. Yeah, exactly.
Right, while I'm eating. Yeah.
A nice little three wine pairing with some hors d'oeuvres and see what goes with what. Yeah, I love doing 3x3 wine pairings. You have 3 little dishes and 3 glasses of wine, and you taste each wine with each food, and so you have like a 9 total pairings. And there will be like one.
The funk in the nose isn't blowing off. It's weird because it wasn't there when I first opened it. Oh, I'm sure it will. But again, it's not really bothering me because it's not.
No, it's not bothering me either.
It's not in the palate. When it's in the palate, I'm done on the first glass.
If we were to hypothetically, and I'm not saying we should, but if we were to hypothetically put a cork in that bottle and give it the Molly Duker shake, a lot of that funk would be gone after about 5 or 6 iterations of that. My dad and I had a super funky. I can't remember. I think it was either Côte de Roussillon or Languedoc, which is the area of southern France that's to the west of the Rhone. Yep. And a lot of them are just very funky. It's just how they are. And I was like, oh, what's going on with this? Is the bottle bad? I said, no, give it to me. And so I just shook the heck out of it for, I don't know, maybe a minute. Like
people are like, it's corked. No, it's funky.
No,
corked
definitely not
totally
corked.
Different. And the thing is, I used to get, like, every 10th or 15th bottle would be corked when I first started drinking wine. I don't remember the last time I had a corked bottle.
Yeah.
I don't remember. Actually, I do remember it. I was in, and I'm just surprised because it was corked. It was clearly corked, and I was in a Maggiano's, and it was a really expensive wine.
Yeah.
But they were selling it by the glass because they had a Corvin. And it was corked. And I called the manager. I'm like, this is terrible.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, you know, these more expensive wines. I'm like, dude, I've had this bottle 11 times.
I know what they
taste
like. Yeah.
It's not supposed to taste like this. And we picked it up and he was like, oh, dude, don't drink that. That's corked. And I'm like,
I told you.
How much was left? He's like, you got the last glass of it. I'm like, so these people are ordering this thing that's $30 a glass, and they're not knowing that it's corked?
2 things.
Because it was corked on the first glass. That doesn't happen once you just open. You know, that happens before you open it.
Speaking of genetics, there is actually genetic predisposition to be more or less sensitive to cork taint.
Okay.
I am less sensitive. Now, if you point it out to me, and I go, oh yeah, that is corked. You're right. I was wondering what I was picking up on.
I knew it was
Katie at Wine Lab. If there's one molecule of I can't remember the name of the molecular compound. TCA, I think it is maybe. Trichloroanisole.
I don't have any.
I just pulled that out of deep storage.
There you go.
But Katie is literally a scientific machine when it comes to detecting TCA. Like you could put one molecule of TCA into a bottle of wine and she would be able to detect it. So you get the glass with it in it.
Now, I don't drink Tempranillo very often because it's a little thinner than what I'm after. It doesn't tend to be as big and bold, but this one's, you know, the thing is, I like the age. It does stuff that I really do enjoy.
The thing about Tempranillo is
this one's definitely bringing the age
compared to Grenache,
which I prefer.
Yes,
especially from Spain.
Grenache is going to be usually going to be round. It's going to be rounder and fuller. It's going to have a denser.
Can you imagine if you put Grenache in oak for 5 years?
Yeah, actually, because the thing is it would compensate for Grenache's general lack of tannin. The funny thing about Grenache is that it makes really deep-colored wines that are super light if they're not oaked. You have an unoaked Grenache, and you essentially...
All the ones I like are oaked.
Yeah, no, I know, but remember the Blanc Frankish that we had?
Yep.
And you were talking about how it was on the lighter end.
They weren't before. That's interesting. So I've already seen some development.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. Little kind of. I don't want to say brittle. What's the word I'm looking for?
In my case, it just feels like I'm chewing chalk.
But it's weird because
but that doesn't bother me. It does bother some people.
But it's such an old wine. It's a very odd way for them to feel. You would think they'd be a little. You know what it probably is that we just opened it. They're probably. I'm gonna give mine a really good spin.
I feel bad now for not canting it. I think it's super.
I think it's super cool because this. I mean, think about it this way. We talk all the time about decanting, and
that funk is not blowing off, bro.
And we tell people like, oh, we decant it for this reason. It's really cool for people to get to see up front what not decanting a wine is like, and so you, the viewer, get to decide. You're like, hey, you know, chalky tannins do it. And some people they do. Or you're like, oh no,
I'm just spinning away.
But if you hate chalky tannins, let this be your sort of visual reminder. Decant that, leave it. You know, you can always try a little tiny sip, and if it's still too chalky, you can come back to it 30 minutes later. That's the nice thing about decanting is you can kind of pilot your own enjoyment from the experience.
Have an ounce every half hour until you're like, ooh, that's exactly what I'm looking for.
Yep.
If you get there, you usually do though with the better wines.
Yeah, no, my dad did that with the funky wine because we had some wine left in his storage vessel, the one with the floating lid, and he said, I like this. He said, I'm gonna finish the wine that's in, you know, my decanter, and then we'll pour this in there, and by that point it'll be exactly where I want it. And it's like that's some forethought right there. My dad would definitely like this. It's been so funny because my dad was not a huge wine person in the 70s or 80s because he was poor. He couldn't really afford it. But it's really interesting. He has a real affinity for old school Bordeaux, Rioja, you know, Chianti. Yeah. No, I know you don't like Chianti, but it's in his price range.
Right.
If he could buy Barolo and Amarone, he would.
From my opinion, Chianti is low rent Pinot Noir.
Right.
So you know, and I don't like Pinot Noir. Now we're talking the low rent.
Right.
You know, trailer. Well, I shouldn't say that.
No.
You know.
But the thing is that it's really interesting because no one. Like, some people, I get the sense that they're old school wine drinkers because that's what they were drinking back in the, you know, like, we have friends who were drinking wine in the 70s and 80s. And so, like, if you have these old school Riojas, it's like, oh, yeah, that's like what I was tasting back then. My dad doesn't have any of that. That is just literally his taste. And it's so cool to watch it evolve. No one told him that, and also, if you told my dad to have wine taste, he would go and do the opposite because he's contrary that way. I don't get it from the ground. So... You know that 100% that is just what he likes.
It's still funky.
I think it just might be innately funky.
It could be.
I mean, the thing is...
My problem is when the funk finds its way onto my palate.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I hate that.
Is it funky on the palate?
No,
it's not.
I don't mind it as long as it's not funky on the palate.
Yeah. It's really interesting because when Warren and I say funky, there are types of yeast that are not Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is the brewers and winemakers yeast. There are yeast like Brettanomyces, which in wine is considered a fault, and in beer is responsible for sours. So if you like sours, Brettanomyces is a wonderful yeast.
Yep.
If you are a winemaker, you want to try to keep Brett out of your wine barrels. My guess is I'm not very good at detecting Brett. I think this has a tiny, or maybe a not tiny bit of Brett. The thing is that, again, getting back into genetics, there is a wide swath of people that can detect Brett, like me and Warren, but don't find it particularly offensive unless it's in very, very large quantities.
Right.
And then there are people like Rick Hall, who used to be at Chateau and is now at Ironheart, who are just completely turned off by, hey buddy, by any, and he was the one that actually taught me what to look for, because there are what I would call more benign variants and more malevolent variants. And the more benign variants is just like, oh, earthy, funky, kind of this indefinable thing that I can't quite put my finger on.
And there's earth on the palate. There is earth on the palate.
And then there's what's called sweaty horse blanket.
Dark cherry.
Barnyard.
Yeah, and it doesn't have sweaty horse blanket.
No, it does not.
Barnyard. You know, and I don't like barnyard, but sometimes I'm okay with forest floor.
Right.
And it depends on just exactly how it's expressed. Sometimes I'm okay with it, and other times I'm like, yeah, we're done here.
You know what's so funny? Remember that Blanc Frankish we had, and you talked about how funky it was? What's interesting is that people who are used to Brett often think that it's Brett. That is just Blanc Frankish. That's just how it is, like, naturally. So there's more to the equation than just, oh, was it kept in oak? Is there fault going on? Yeah. Some grapes are just naturally funky. Monastrell and Blanc Frankish are two of the...
Monastrell's real funky.
Very, very funky. And it can turn some people off if they're not used to it. But there's also, I mean, Brett is all through Europe. I mean, it's not considered as much of a fault over there as it is here. And it's endemic in Burgundy and in the Rhone. And what's interesting is that if you go to places like, say, in Burgundy, and it only affects, what's interesting is that Brett cannot, I don't know if it can't survive or if there's just not the protein level that it needs to survive. Brett does not affect white wines. It only affects red wines.
Okay.
So it's not possible to have a Brettanomyces infected
What was
white
the
wine.
effect? I remember we had that really nice 20-year-old Maxford Richter here. That we had that 75 Riesling. Not
the
Riesling.
The Amarone?
Yeah, the Amarone. And there was something going on in that one, and you explained what that was, but I don't remember anymore.
Yeah. You know what I think that was is that it might have been something to do with the terpene content of the wine. Riesling's so the thing that makes Riesling both floral and smell like diesel is a class of compounds called terpenes. As you might be able to guess from the name, it wasn't.
No.
I mean, weird chemical reaction. Wine is a chemical reaction that's constantly happening. People think that once it's bottled, it stops happening. Oh, it keeps going. I mean, that's a perfect matrix. The tartaric acid is good at keeping out any microbial stuff, but it's an acidified matrix full of organic compounds. They're gonna bond together and do stuff. I mean, that's part of the reason that aged wine is. I mean, if the reactions weren't happening,
might as well open everything and drink it right away.
Exactly, and why keep it in your cellar? There's no point.
Because you bought too much to drink in one night. I mean, that's it. But this one, you know, I like this one for all the reasons for none of the reasons that I like Napa Cabs,
right?
Or Petite Syrah.
Well, it's nothing like a Napa Cab.
No, nothing like either of those two wines. Or for that matter, it's completely different than a Zin.
Well, and I was thinking when we were talking, when you said this isn't light bodied, but it's different.
I'd call it medium.
The thing is that there is light there. I was thinking as I was tasting this. You put this next to a Napa Cab or like the Double Back or something like that. Cabernet Sauvignon has a completely different structure as a grape.
I've had plenty of cabs that this is just as big as. Those just aren't the ones that I actually drink regularly on purpose. You know, it's like the best thing that the restaurant had, so I ordered it. But this does not come up to the huge thing that you get with, as you've mentioned, Double Back, or with Paul Hobbs, or any Orange Swift wine, really.
Well, and it's funny because, you know, we talk about oak aging, and this spent 5 years in oak, and so it's clear.
Or any of Randy Dunn's wines, whether they're his wines or the Feather, you know.
It's clear that the time it spent in oak, it's not additive. It's not like if you spend 5 years in oak, you have 2.5 times the amount of tannin. That's clearly not true. No. My guess is that after a certain point...
Well, they've got the tighter American tannins in here, too, rather than the French.
Absolutely.
Because it's only 10% French. I'd love to try this at 100%
But, I mean,
French.
Have you ever sipped a cup of tea? After a certain point, you can only take so much from the tea leaves. You can
true.
Leave it there for
and
5 hours.
5 years is a good, long time.
Exactly. So it had plenty of time to draw out all the available tannin that was there with one usage.
Yeah.
My guess is after those 5 years, those barrels were essentially neutral or as close to neutral as you could get.
Because they pulled it all out.
I mean, the thing is, most wineries are going to use a barrel. Like, you get a new barrel, and let's say you're going to keep a red wine in there for maybe a year or a little more. So or say you're going to do it for 2 years. You can assume that you can get 3 to 5 uses, 5 if you're doing 1 year, 3 if you're doing 2.
Yeah.
So they essentially put a wine through that 3 to 5 year cycle.
Which is probably why they went with the less expensive American oak rather than going with the French oak, which is much more expensive.
Well, and also, I mean, the thing is that I don't remember this off the top of my head, But I feel like the Spanish have an affinity for American oak because it's giving them the kind of tannic structure that they want.
Okay.
I don't think they're using it as much for flavor. See, the French have been growing oak trees for like 800 years or so.
And I do love the flavor it imparts.
Oh,
it was
absolutely.
one of the reasons that I was so happy with all the Maltese wines. They all did 2 years in French oak.
It adds tannin.
It really works for me.
It adds tannin, but it's a flavor. I mean, especially when you're talking about. I mean, it works in red wines too. Part of the reason French oak is so beneficial for Chardonnay is that it's not overpowering the wine with foreign elements. It's introducing fig and vanilla and stuff that harmonizes with the natural elements of the...
Well, there's definitely vanilla in here.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. I mean, there's vanilla in all oak.
Yeah. If you can taste it. You can't always taste it.
No, but I mean, the vanillin is a compound that occurs naturally in oak. That's part of the reason it's used as
But sometimes it tastes like caramel.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Sometimes it tastes like toasted oak.
Yeah, no, I mean, one of the reasons that oak has been...
Vanilla, paraffin, wax.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, one of the reasons that oak was originally used as a wine storage unit, you know, in 1300s, 1400s, is that the flavor imparted to the wine was pretty good.
Yep.
They weren't doing it for artistic reasons. It was just what they had.
It's like people did not put hops into beer hoping to change the flavor. They put hops into beer because they needed to get across the ocean to India. And it's a preservative.
Yep.
Yeah, I got you.
It's a preservative. It's a preservative, and it's also a. Doesn't it have a? I'm trying to remember. Hops has some kind of like antimicrobial.
Yeah. That's what that. That's part of what makes it a preservative.
Yeah.
And so it got across the ocean, but it also changed the flavor of the beer. Well, that was just a byproduct of getting beer that didn't go bad to India, because part of that, I mean, I think we're sure we've talked about
probably
is that, you know, part of the contract of being a soldier in the British Army was 3 pints of grog a day, which is beer, and it was going bad before it could get there, so they had to do something, which was interesting because then when all those guys got home and they were drinking the lighter beer, and like, what is this crap? Give me something with some oomph.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, they were using hops in European beer, but they weren't using...
Not to that extent.
Not to that
extent,
extent,
dry
absolutely.
Hopping it, which was really what that was.
Exactly, yeah.
Let's get off the beer. I don't want to talk about it. I'm trying to remember where I was. I was at a restaurant, and they gave me tiny pours. It was only $4 a bottle. I mean, it was only... they were only 4 ounces per glass.
Yeah.
But it was like $5 a glass for wine that I usually pay 12 or 15 for. So I said to my wife, I'm like, this is a stingy pour, but at this price, Warren's never going to complain because, you know, 2 glasses and I've got 8 ounces and I paid less than I normally would for 6.
Yep. Always nice when you can do that.
Where was I? We had to eat somewhere.
One of the things I don't know if Barrel Chest in Roanoke still does this. When I used to go there back in the day, you could get I think it was, I want to say 6, 8 and 12 ounce pours of beer, because some of the beers they had were super high gravity, and it was like, I want to say 2, 4, and 6 ounce pours of wine. And so if there was an expensive wine that you were curious about or just wanted to taste, or
kabuki.
Okay, nice, excellent. But I really like that because I could buy like a smaller glass of wine that I would normally get from a wine that I might not, or a producer I might not be able to afford, and I could drink it while I was walking around shopping.
Yeah, the one in question was Robert Mondavi.
Oh,
Mondavi. I don't know how to pronounce his name. But he's like right at the bottom threshold of wines that I will willingly drink.
Like Opus 1?
No, Opus 1's...
Well, Robert Mondavi.
Well, I know he did that, but I'm just talking about the one that says Robert Mondavi.
Yeah.
You know, it's one you can buy
labels.
And you can buy it in Food Line. It's not that good. You know, I won't buy it to have like a bottle of it.
Right.
Although, you know, I was given a bottle of it by the folks at Parkway Grill, by Logan and Kelly, because they had a restaurant before this one.
Oh yeah.
And it caught fire and it burned, so they couldn't sell the wines because they were in the fire. And you know, you could see the fire damage on the label. So they didn't know what it was, and they're just like, "Warren, we want you to have this," and it was, you know, 10 years old.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, cool," and you know. I opened it up, not expecting it. Been through a fire. It was probably hot, probably dead. No, it was actually fine. It aged well. No, it was good.
That's cool.
You know, and it was a wine that I wasn't expecting anything from because I don't really think much of his wines.
Well, here's the thing: is that
even at the top end, I think he's not as good as what he charges.
Unless the bottle was actually in the fire.
Right. Well, there was smoke damage. So
right.
Someone close to it that it could get some heat. But
well, as long as it had the foil over the cork, that shouldn't be an issue. The thing about American wines in specific is that what they do is a process called cold and heat stabilization. The cold stabilization gets the excess tartaric acid crystals out of the wine, and the heat stabilization prevents it from clouding over if there's a protein. Basically, what they do is it gets the proteins out of solution so that the wine doesn't turn cloudy if it's exposed to excess heat.
Gotcha.
Now, that being said, you shouldn't expose a wine to excess heat.
No,
But heat
not if you can avoid
stabilization,
it.
heat stabilization is like an insurance policy that makes it a lot.
But if your
less
house
likely to-
burns down, your house still burnt down.
Right, exactly. Well, I think
Insurance or
heat
no?
stabilization is more because if say your wine gets left in a hot UPS truck for a couple of days,
Yeah.
it's gonna be still
The
drinkable.
funkiness isn't gone, but it's lighter on the nose.
You think?
A little lighter. This
Huh.
for me.
See, to
Yeah,
me,
maybe not.
to me, it's still just as present. This is definitely a funky wine, but I mean, honestly, with a Rioja this old, if you think about Spain and where its wine industry has been in the late '90s, I'm not trying to give Spain a hard time. In the late '90s, its industry was still going through some upheaval. It's kind of amazing the wine is this good, as far as I'm concerned. And also, what's really neat is that, like, back in 2008, I had a wine that was about, how old is this? So this is it's 98, so it's 24 years old. Yeah, it's about the same. It's 23 years old. It was a wine from the year I was born. It was an 85 Rioja.
Mm-hmm.
And that thing was like drinking a cigar box. Like, I kid you not. It was just straight up tobacco. And I'm not talking just pipe tobacco, not
Right.
sweet vanilla, like
Cigar, yeah.
vegetal tobacco. It wasn't bad. It was just one of those things.
Just had tobacco to start with, and there might be a little pipe tobacco, vanilla pipe tobacco still left, but not much.
And the
not
thing
at
is,
this point.
the nose is still funky. I feel like the palate has really softened
The
and broadened.
palate's nice, yeah. This is a very good wine.
Early on, the palate was kind of hitting you at this point, and now it's softened and broadened into a much more expansive and rounder feel. Nowhere near as round or as lush as
But
a
it feels
Grenache.
more like something from a cold climb
Mm-hmm.
than it did before.
Absolutely.
And I don't believe that this is a cold climb, but I'm not sure really because I don't know
Not
Spain
at all
that well.
I mean, it's not. Rioja is not full on Mediterranean.
And it's not Washington State.
No, but it's definitely not Washington State. I mean, nowhere. I don't think anywhere in Spain is going to compare to Washington State in terms of climate.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about we were talking about this earlier is the Grenache versus Tempranillo based Riojas.
Mm-hmm.
You can really tell the difference. It's really
Oh,
interesting. And there's three regions that are right next to each other: Rioja, Navarra, and I always forget the third one. I always feel really bad about it. But there's three that are basically like cheek by jowl with each other.
It's not that I'm bored. I'm tired.
And you've had a bottle of wine.
I'm back in the gym. I hadn't been in the gym since I got COVID, and I'm kicking myself hard, because I don't want to be round.
Right.
Yeah. So here we are.
But the three regions both grow Grenache and Tempranillo, and by and large, Riojas, and this is a very strong generalization. You can find Riojas that are close to 100% Grenache. By and large, Rioja is a Tempranillo-driven region. There's a lot of variation, and there's some blending allowed. We mentioned Graciano, which is a grape that's often thrown in, and I've run across some 100% Graciano wines from Rioja, which are quite good. But Navarra is usually more Grenache-driven. And just tasting Navarra side by side with Rioja, there's like this softness and lushness to Navarra that always, also the price, we're usually cheaper. But you and I have talked about this, is that Tempranillo isn't your favorite grape, and I would say that I like both of them, but I'm probably more drawn to...
It's still quite tannic, but the chalkiness is gone.
And I think a lot of that tannin is probably going to be the oak-derived tannin.
Oh, for sure.
The acidity is all Tempranillo-derived. I mean, that's the thing about Tempranillo. It is a tart grape varietal.
And when you do the acidity with the tannins right, it's really nice. Because I know everyone thinks, oh, it's acidic. That's bad. No,
acidic
not at all. Is
all.
not bad in wine if done right with the other things that it's going to mesh with and interact with. The tannins, the flavors.
Honestly, I mean, this is my takeaway from all the years that I've spent in wine. Is it's kind of like the three rules of real estate: is acidity, acidity, acidity. There are a lot of...
So sorry, folks.
There are a lot of other factors in wine, and I tell them, when I say that acidity is most important, I don't mean that tannin isn't important or that flavor chemistry is important, but if you don't have a good acidic backbone to your wine, you're operating at a disadvantage.
Yep.
That being said, one of my favorite grape varietals here in Virginia, Petit Verdot, operates at a very low acidity. it doesn't make it a bad grape. It means that you're rolling dice.
Yeah. So hopefully, at some point, we'll have 2 and 3 cameras so that we can edit between them. Because the reason that you never see newscasters yawn or touch their hair, move their hair, itch their face, is there are 3 angles, one on each, a long back one. So if somebody does that, they're awful. You don't see it.
Yeah.
You know, they're on a slight delay so they can do that. And so while you think, wow, these guys never touch their face, they never touch their hair. Not true. But they got 3 cameras and a dude whose job it is to make sure you never see any of them yawn, touch their face, or their hair. That's their job. That's their only job.
Right. One of my favorite YouTube channels is Red Letter Media, and it's 3 guys, Jay Bowman, Mike Stacklasa, and Rich Evans. And I'm
so sorry. God.
But they round robin taking turns editing their videos. So they will release a 45-minute video. And one of them will mention, like, oh, I'm going to have a fun time editing this or whatever. But somebody will make a mistake on camera. Yeah. And the one will say, oh, don't worry, I'll edit that out.
Yeah.
And it's very deliberately left in.
And sometimes I have left a few of those in. As I'm sure, if you've watched all of our videos, you know one of us will say, I will edit that out. And then I look at it afterwards.
Why not?
Like, yeah, I'll leave that in.
Why not? You might as well.
Well, I take, dude, we had one video I edited an hour out. You know, I mean, I don't do that usually. I don't have to do that with this one. So far, we haven't said anything that I think needs to go away. We haven't stumbled on our words enough to kill it.
We haven't talked about politics or religion at all.
Which I don't want to do. We talked a little about the Russians. That was last video. That was last video. Never mind.
That's different, though.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that at all this one.
True.
This is Spain. And the reason I mentioned that is we've done 2 tonight. The first one was Ukrainian wine, and it was in Odessa that it was attacked by the Russians and driven off by the Ukrainians because, well, they have a better trained army and weapons.
But that's just an objective statement of fact. That's not really political.
Yeah, well, you know, it's political in America. There's 10% of the Republicans are pro-Putin, pro-fascism. Actually, more than that. Okay, I got to stop with that. That might get edited out.
But the point that I'm trying to make is I don't think politics or religion should be out. When people say, "Oh, I don't want to talk about politics or religion," what I hear them saying and what I try to stay away from is statements of judgment or of, you know. But you, like, for instance, it is entirely possible to have an intellectual discussion about the role that Catholicism played in 4th, 5th century Europe without.
You can't have one today.
Well, it really depends on the company that you're keeping and how open-minded you think your audience is.
Mm-hmm.
By and large, I stay away from politics and religion that I think is going to cause some kind of furor or uproar within the...
I try to stay away from politics. I am very opinionated. I have a very real slant that I'm not sharing. And I try not to share it because I understand. I'm just a dude living in Virginia. Nobody cares. I can't change anything.
But I mean, for instance, if people say politics and religion are off the table... It's entirely possible for a group of adults to have a discussion about the Protestant Reformation in Europe without jumping down each other's throats.
It's true.
Now, they can also jump down each other's throats.
And folks, if you care, you can go on Facebook. I have an endless thread with over 300,000 comments on it.
Yes.
And we have one rule. No politics. I'm a little tight on the religion. If it starts to veer into politics, because religion so often does, then it's gone.
Yeah.
But, you know, somebody said, hey, Warren, this is the most literate thread in the history of Facebook. Because there are people who what they do every day is do the one paragraph of a public domain book. I mean, so we're talking like somebody's doing Winnie the Pooh right now.
Yes, I remember that. I always wondered what was
somebody
going
else
on
is
with that.
doing, another buddy, Jim, is doing, right now, he's just finishing up Walden.
Okay.
Which I had to read in college. Dude, that's a hard slog. If you don't have to read it, I wouldn't recommend it.
Wasn't there somebody doing C.S. Lewis at one point?
Oh, no. None of that's in the public domain. If it's not in the public domain, I'll shut it down fast. I mean, I make my living on
there was a friend of yours that would keep putting them up there, and I was always baffled, and then you told me about that. I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. I thought that I didn't know what was going on. It was just these random paragraphs, or it seemed random.
Well, but if you're there and you're there
right,
every day,
exactly, yeah.
So there's like 4 or 5 novels have been posted in this thing. But at any rate, there's no politics there and very little religion. So go there if you want to check it out. We talk every day. There are people that didn't talk about their day. There are people who just they talk about their day and they post one one paragraph a day of a book, or
Right.
sometimes they do one every hour. You know, it depends. But that's just this weird thing that I've got going on there, and there was a point to that I've lost the
Well, we
thread
were
of.
talking about how politics and religion are often off the
Right,
table.
and so
in
this is
discussions.
off the table. You can't talk about politics because I want everybody to feel comfortable there.
And I the thing is that if I am at a party or a get together and the host is very clearly doesn't want politics or religion into the argument, I'm not going. But like for instance, if I'm at a bar and it's a free for all and nobody there is hosting, and I bring up, like for instance, some kind of economic theory, and someone's like, "Oh, I don't want to talk politics," I'm like, "We're not talking politics. We're talking economic theory."
The thing is that American culture is so all entwined
Mm-hmm.
and tied up. You know, you can't even pick a side on a sports team sometimes without being political, or which guy you're okay with, you know, protesting what he believes in versus, you know, there are some guys that'll take a knee for a reason and that's
Yeah.
evil, and then there's another guy who'll take a knee for a different reason and that's okay.
Right.
And so you know, it's just crazy.
I guess the point that I was trying to make is that I can talk about political or religious systems that I don't agree with and just be like, it's interesting to talk about to me.
Yeah, I find that it always turns into
It does.
It devolves.
And it's sad
I'm
for
not
me because
interested.
it's like the thing is I don't agree with many people. So by and large, if I'm describing a system, I'm probably not going to agree with it.
Yeah.
But my dislike of it doesn't enter into the fact that it's worth talking about. You know.
That it is what it is.
Exactly. Well, like for instance, Henry VIII. We might
That's
despise
a callback.
to Paul Stanley.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. It's a callback. It's a callback to an earlier.
It's a Paulback.
It's a Paulback. I like that. I'm sure Paul Stanley's not seeing this, but if you are, Paul, we love you.
But like for instance, if we're talking about Henry VIII or some Roman emperor we didn't like, we're not taking a political stance by talking about the dude. We're just literally describing the dude. Nobody's, as far as I know, going to get on you
Well,
for
until he
talking
was
about.
unhorsed, he was actually a pretty decent king.
Right. Well,
But
was he
then-
also diabetic, and that caused some issues
they
too?
don't really know. I mean,
Right.
how the hell would you know? But
Right.
it was not. He was supposedly the best tennis player in the world.
Oh, he was super athletic.
Well,
and
yeah, he was
fit
6'2", had a 32-inch
Mhm.
waist. The big fat guy you know about is not the young.
No, not the
he
young
was,
Henry
He was
VIII.
called Magnificent Harry
Mhm.
when he took the throne because he was athletic and he took the throne at 17.
And he was well
His dad
loved.
died right up until he was unhorsed, had
Yeah.
a closed head injury, and after that was kind of crazy.
Well, I mean, it says a lot that when the guy devolved into, let's call it madness, that he was still very well loved for a long time. It took him a long while to really spend the currency of public
But
opinion.
even then, because he was a British king, it never went all the way. I mean,
True,
he was,
but I mean, I'm not talking about by
think
the
we
people. I'm talking about by
edited-
his
right.
people.
I think we edited it out from one of the other ones that there was a point where Henry and his retinue
Yeah.
were set upon by people who were unhappy because of the way he was treating one of his wives. I don't
Right.
remember which one. I think it was the first one, but I'm
Yeah.
not positive. And none of them had anything more than a dagger.
Right.
Because it never occurred to them they need anything more than a dagger. to go
Right.
out. And with an incredibly angry throng of British subjects, they actually didn't need anything more than a dagger. They spent a few minutes talking and calming them down and rode on. You know, and it
Well, the
was-
thing is that the British people as a whole, I mean, and I'm going to say with the partial exception of Charles I, and I'm saying partial because the people didn't execute Charles I, the Puritans did.
Right.
Now, that being said, there was a large popular uprising against Charles I that didn't just include Puritans. However, it was Puritan-driven, and the Puritans were the one that really wanted to cut his head off.
Where are we getting off the
No, we're not. We're talking about how talking about politics can be an enlightening.
right? Because now we're
and
talking
life-
about 500-year-old.
Exactly, stuff
400,
that's
I don't remember
nobody's
how
going to
many-
get mad
300
about.
years? I don't remember.
Nobody's going to get mad over Charles I getting beheaded.
Right.
But the point that I'm trying to make is that the British weren't known for popular uprisings where kings were
I
in
talked
danger.
about that,
Mhm.
and the reasoning for that is like if you were French,
Mhm.
it was illegal to own a weapon.
Exactly.
If you were English, you were required to own a weapon.
Yep.
You were required to, if you above a certain, I mean, if you were certain dirt farmers didn't. But,
A free man, a yeoman.
But a yeoman, you
Mhm.
were required to have a bow. A French, I mean, America, Jesus Christ. A British longbow, which could punch through any armor that's
Yep.
ever been invented. And the difference was the French and their relationship between, which is why they cut all their heads off in the 1700s, was because the French nobility over and over again treated them with disdain and said, "We don't trust you."
And fear.
And whereas the British nobility was like, not only do we trust you, you're our strength. You're at our back. We trust you at our back with the greatest weapon that up till that point had ever been invented. Not only do we trust you with it, we require you to carry it. So they really, the number of British kings who were deposed is, you can count it on, you can cut off a couple of my fingers and count it, which you can't do anywhere else.
Well, the main one that pops up is Charles I, and that was a much more complicated issue.
He was the only time where they didn't have another king on hand who was disputing it, because Richard III was taken out by Bolingbroke, who was Henry. I don't remember what number he was.
Fourth, yes, correct.
Yes, because
Henry
his son
IV.
was the fifth. But they had somebody with it wasn't a very legitimate claim, but and then Henry VII didn't have a particularly legitimate claim when he took the throne by force as well. But he made sure to marry the woman in England with the very best, with the very best claim to the throne. So nobody ever questioned Henry VIII's legitimacy, because you could question his legitimacy to the throne through his father. But if you did, then the dude who was the guy you would go would be through his mother, and it's him. So you're all done.
If you really want to see the encapsulation of how the British nobility interacted with their
and as an Irishman, I don't like the British much.
No, I don't either. No,
but I'm also half British.
This proves my point that we can talk about this without typically having a dog in the fight.
Yeah.
Henry V at Agincourt was rode up to his archers and was there with them, on the field.
Yeah.
I don't think the French king was on the field, and if he was behind a very large.
That's not who they were.
It wasn't who they were.
Even Henry VIII went into battle with his.
And the thing is that when your officers lead the way as enlisted men, you will follow them into whatever ends. That's
Alexander the Great was often told, "Don't do that," and he was like, "Well, I'm going to do it because nobody will let me die." And then he'd be a thing that all of his generals said was a horrible idea. And in fact, that's what ultimately got him killed. Now they won that battle, but he died as a result of it, because he would just go, "Oh yeah, you don't want to do that? Well, watch," and he would go, and everybody would follow him because they just adored him.
Yeah. No, I can't remember the guy's name.
And the worst general in American history, George Armstrong Custer, led from the front, and his men would have followed him to the gates of hell.
They did.
Right, and he was horrible. He was a terrible general, but
the Battle of Little Bighorn proves what a horrible tactician
he was. The man who ended the Civil War, because he cut off Grant's retreat. And he was sent to do it. Lee's, yes, of course. And he was sent to do it because if you needed a man who would accomplish what you sent him to do, no matter the cost, he would do it, because he had absolutely no regard for his own men.
Nope.
But they didn't care, because he had absolutely no regard for his own life.
I think that he had regard for his men. I think that the thing is, you can be a glory hound and still care about the welfare of your men.
His brother got 3
Congressional Medals of Honor
without dying,
which is nearly unheard of.
He didn't get one for the time that he did die.
Actually, has anyone else gotten 3 Congressional Medals of Honor? I don't know either.
All right, I think we're about done. Thank you very much for joining us on this kind of interesting wine.
Very special bottle of wine.
Quite good. Go out and buy it. But if you do, make sure you click on our link and follow it to Vivino and purchase it there. We'll get a percentage, which will allow us to buy more wine to do more reviews. We're never going to make a lot of money on this, but we're having fun. So please, support us.
Sláinte.
Cheers.